Lord, as the sun touched this planet and it woke with the praises of your people for your Son who you lifted from the dead. Languages around the world, people came and gathered. They gathered in the open. They gathered in ancient churches, modern churches, God. They met on beaches, mountains, and open plains. They gathered together, and like angels on the day of Christ's resurrection, our voices are joining together and lifting up and filling the throne room of God with praise. Jesus Christ, you are risen. And we worship you this morning. May you be blessed by our praises. May you be blessed by our praises. May you be blessed by our praises. Love you, Lord. All my heart, mind, soul, and strength. I love you. Amen. Whew. Should we just go home? I mean, man. Wasn't that awesome this morning? Some days as a preacher, you got to come out and say, I need to follow that. Man, it is true, you know. All right, let's go for it. Let's go for it. Dick would be Wellesley College on the Boston Marathon, right? Awesome, man. Yeah, this morning, you know what's cool? We gathered here this morning in worship, and sometimes we don't think about it. But we really do gather with a global voice. Because the beauty of our faith is that it's owned by the world. And because our faith is owned by the world adds its color to what we do on Easter morning. You know, if you're in Bermuda, they're flying kites because they want to celebrate Jesus Christ who is risen from the dead. What a great idea, right? Or out in, this is Guatemala, Antigua, they have spent days with colored chalk dust, flowers, sawdust, making beautiful procession routes through the streets for a holy procession. What a beautiful work of art. If that was me, I'd be the guy saying, on the sides, right? This would be fun in Septis, Greece. It's a little island off the coast of Greece. As Saturday transitions to Sunday, at midnight, they just fill the sky with fireworks to celebrate Jesus Christ come back from the dead. This is in Jerusalem, the Holy Sepulchre. We don't really know where Jesus was buried. We think this is a good guess. There's a church there, and what they do is they gather in Jerusalem at night, and they just light the fire of the Holy Spirit that burns throughout the world. Or in the Vatican this morning, thousands of people from all over the world gathered to celebrate Easter. And here we are in America. Do you know that this weekend in America, 81% of Americans actually celebrate Easter? Now, most of them will spend the day getting together with family or friends for a nice Easter meal. I'm always in for a ham. Count me in, right? 50% of those individuals, though, are going to go to church, which is a great stat. And so we're going to add our American voice and distinctiveness into the praise that rises up into heaven. The stat that really caught me off guard, though, is that 2/3 of U.S. adults say that the biblical accounts of the physical resurrection of Jesus are completely accurate. That surprised me. That means, this is just a way of looking at our Bible, right? Everything on this side, the Old Testament, is before Jesus. Everything on this side, it was since Jesus. And in the top, you see those 4 purple boxes, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. They wrote an account of the life of Jesus. We call them Gospels because the word means good news. We know that Matthew and John were chosen by Jesus, trained by Jesus, and had firsthand experience with the things that Jesus said and did when they wrote them down. We know that Mark was a companion to Peter, and we know that Luke traveled the world with Paul. And Luke probably interviewed the Mother Mary. Talk about man, what an interview. Imagine having that scoop. I would dig that. And so Luke tells this account. Now this is a resurrection account that most Americans believe is true. And listen to this account. But very early on Sunday morning, the women went to the tomb, taking the spices they had prepared. They found that the stone had been rolled away from the entrance. A group of women went to a tomb that looked like this. because they were expecting a dead body. They were not expecting a live person. They were thinking that there would be a body, and they wanted to finish the burial preparations. When Jesus was taken off the cross, it was close to the start of their holy day. He was quickly prepared and put into a tomb. But you would go, and you would pack the body with about 50 pounds of spices, and you would tightly wrap with a cloth around it to hold the spices in place, because as the body decomposed, it smelled bad. And then about a year later, they would collect the bones, put it in a little box, an ossuary, and then they would put that up on a shelf. That's what they were looking for. Now, we know the tomb, you see that little wall, there's a channel behind it, and in that channel would have been a large rock that would have taken 3 or 4 people to roll into place to cover the entrance. And their primary concern is who's going to move the stone. When they get there, the stone is removed. So they went into the tomb. They went through that little opening, and they couldn't find the body of Jesus. Not a lot of room in a tomb. This is not an Indiana Jones tomb. This is a small room, right? So it's kind of hard to hide a body. As they stood there puzzled, and I love that word, because in the original languages, we know that the Bible wasn't written in English, wasn't even written in King James English. It was written in Greek, Hebrew, and a little bit of Aramaic. But in the Greek, that word puzzled really means they were lost and confused. They were in the tomb, lost and confused because there was no body. 2 men suddenly appeared to them, clothed in dazzling robes. Weird. The women were terrified and bowed their faces to the ground. Here we are, halfway through the story, and the people who went looking for Jesus were expecting a dead body. They were puzzled and confused when they couldn't find it, and now they're terrified. And the men said, "Why are you looking among the dead for someone who is alive? He isn't here. He's risen from the dead. Remember what he told you back in Galilee, that the Son of Man must be betrayed into the hands of sinful men and be crucified, and that he would rise again on the 3rd day?" And the women remembered, oh yeah, he said that, right? For everyone who is a parent of a teenager, you should feel good about that, right? You're like, I said 3 days ago. Oh, yeah, all right? They didn't even remember. They weren't expecting it to happen because they didn't understand what Jesus has said. It didn't make sense to them. And so they rushed back from the tomb to tell his 11 disciples and everyone else and what had happened. And this was Mary Magdalene, Joanna, Mary the mother of James, and several other women who told the apostles what had happened. The word apostles, this was the original people that Jesus had called out to be the core team of the first church. Right? There's 11 because Judas is no longer in the picture. They went to them. They were not at the tomb. They did not expect what was going to happen. The women had to tell them. Now, you would think that after spending 3 years with Jesus, following him all over the place, seeing the miracles, hearing the teachings, they would be like, oh, I didn't set an alarm, right? You would think they would be excited about this news. Instead, but the story sounded like nonsense to the men. And every woman in the room goes, ain't that true, right? Right? You know the business, right? And your husband is like, nah. And it's like, no, really, right? They didn't believe him. However, and I love Peter, because Peter is, if I'm like anyone in the 12 disciples, I'm Peter, a little bit impetuous. Jumped up, ran to the tomb to look, and stooping. Now, Peter was one of a select 3 that was present at some really marvelous moments in the life of Jesus. And Peter was the one who walked on water. Okay, so you would expect Peter running to the tomb like, I forgot, oh my gosh. Instead, he stoops in, saws the empty linen wrapping, went home again, wondering what happened. Puzzled, which means lost and confused. Now, listen, if this had happened in America and it was the start of a new religion, an American marketing agency would have said, this is not a good story. Right? Because nobody is expecting Jesus to come back to life. They spent all that time with him, and they're caught off guard. They're puzzled and confused. If you want this religion to take the world, you're going to have to change the story. Right? The story should have happened. It's how I would expect it. They're all there at nighttime waiting for the moment. They got a countdown. 5, 4, 3, 2. 2, 1. All these people there, the rock moves. Jesus comes out, and they go, yeah! Right? They're all, woo! High-fiving each other. Jesus runs out of the tomb like Tom Brady taking the field at the Super Bowl. They're all out like this. He's going, boom, 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 boom. They're like, Jesus, what are we going to do? We're going to do churches. A church for you, a church for you, a church for you, a church for you, a church for you. Everybody gets a church. And they go, yeah! And they take off into the world. That would be a good story. All right? It was not our story. Which some people say gives authenticity to it, right? Because it's not the story you'd expect. None of the people look good. They're all lost, confused, terrified. They don't get what's going on. They don't remember the teachings of Jesus. They're walking around, and the big question on everybody's mind is, where's Jesus? Luke tells you, and it's not what you would expect. It's not like Jesus shows up with Pontius Pilate and goes, hey, dude, we need to talk. Not like he shows up with the religious leaders who put him on the cross and like, right? None of this is going to happen. I think what Jesus does and what Luke records for us is for everyone who wasn't there, for everyone who couldn't be there, for everyone who heard the story later, how can Jesus show up for me is what Luke is going to talk about. So let's go right into it, because this is the next thing that he says. So the same day, 2 of Jesus' followers are walking to the village of Emmaus. This is important, right? Everyone's like, where's the body? Walking to Emmaus, 7 miles from Jerusalem. So this is a long walk. As they walked along, they were talking about everything that had happened. When I was reading this for the first time, I hit that sentence, I was like, so what? Right? Where's Jesus? What's going on? And as they talked and discussed these things, Jesus shows up here. He shows up with 2 guys who are walking to another town. And he came and began to walk with them, but God kept them from recognizing him. This is weird. Jesus silently shows up and begins to walk along with 2 people then throughout life to talk about the resurrection. And here's what happens. So Jesus asks them, and this is a great portion of the story. Jesus starts and ends with a question. Because some of us think Jesus is going to intrude into our lives. It's going to be a great dramatic display. There needs to be like lights flashing and angels and all that. And if that doesn't happen to people, they're like, do I really know who Jesus is? Most of the time for people, Jesus does this. Quietly shows up in your life and begins to probe you with some questions. What are you discussing? So intently as you walk along. And they stopped short. I love it. They stopped short. You read the Bible, you got to put the emotion in, and sadness is written all over their face. And one of them, Clopas, says, you got to be the only person in Jerusalem who hasn't heard about all the things that have happened here the last few days. Jesus' death rocked the city. And Jesus goes, what things? He's trying to draw the conversation out of them, to engage them in a discussion. The things that happened to Jesus. The man from Nazareth, they said. He was a prophet who did powerful things. He was a mighty teacher in the eyes of God and all the people, but our leading priests and other religious leaders, they handed him over to be condemned to death. They crucified him. That last sentence, because we wear golden chains and put crosses as tattoos on our bodies, we're missing the impact. For Jesus to be crucified was to say, we lost. They killed him like a common criminal, a man cursed by God. And we thought he was going to change the world. You know that place where sometimes life changes and it doesn't go the way you expected it to, and you're wondering, God, where are you? You've walked with God for so long, and you've expected like these wonderful experiences were going to continue the rest of your life, but then something happens, you go like, God, what in the world is happening? This isn't supposed to be the way it goes. They said we had hoped he was the Messiah who would come to rescue Israel. And this is the key. They were looking for the wrong Jesus. Their Jesus was supposed to be a Jesus who's going to change their nation. See, this is what happens. When your religion and your politics become so intertwined that they start to become the same thing, what happens is your political leaders become your saviors and your national identity becomes the kingdom of God. Right? And you begin to think this. Because they had part of their history where they, at one point, a foreign power had oppressed them, and Americans, we don't get this. You'd have to be in Ukraine right now to understand what it means for a foreign power to come in and say, I'll take this, I'll take this, I'll take this, I'll take this. Right? Yeah, that's the only way you can understand it. And there, right now, Rome was the, I'll take this, 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 and this. And you went, okay. And what they thought was Jesus was going to come in, push Rome out, and make Israel great again. It was the wrong Jesus. Jesus didn't care about politics. He wasn't looking for another nation to run. Jesus had much higher aspirations. They were looking for the wrong Jesus. So when God did something they didn't expect that rocked their world, they were lost. This all happened 3 days ago, they said. And then some women from our group of followers were at his tomb early this morning. They came back with an amazing report. They said his body was missing. They said his body was missing. They didn't say, right, these guys aren't saying Jesus was alive. They said, and that they had seen angels who said that Jesus is alive. You know what they're doing? They're doubting the story. And some of our men ran out to see, and sure enough, his body was gone. Humans are not talking about a risen Savior. They're talking about a missing body. And angels, women were eating gummies on their way to the tomb, and they were seeing angels, right? It's like, come on, man. And Jesus says to them, you foolish people. You find it so hard to believe all that the prophets wrote in the scriptures. Wasn't it clearly predicted that the Messiah would have to suffer all these things before entering into glory? And Jesus took them through the writings of Moses and the prophets, explaining all the scriptures, the things concerning himself. Jesus took his Bible, what we call our Old Testament, and he's like, let me tell you something. Let's talk for a moment. And he went back to the Bible, and he said, if you really want to understand what God was doing with Jesus, you have to go back to the Bible. Because it's right, you can't get past the 3rd chapter in the very big first book in our Bible before you go like, oh, there's Jesus. And you start to go a little bit further and you run into Abraham. Oh, there's more about Jesus in this. And then you get a little bit farther into, you start to get to Kings and you talk about David and the stump of David and the messianic promise and all this. And like, well, there's Jesus all over the place. You get into the prophets and they're talking about someone called the suffering servant. Well, there's Jesus all over the place. Jesus took them back to the Bible because the only way to truly understand Jesus and God's plan for him is to go into the Bible. Go back to the source materials. Which makes me wonder, what are people thinking? In New England, this is a stat that breaks my heart. 90% of the people who live in the 6 New England states fall into one, if not more than one of these categories. They don't have a Bible at home. And they don't remember ever there being a Bible at home. Right? They have never read the Bible. And if they have a Bible, they have rarely read it. They may have tried. They got through Genesis. That was kind of cool. It was kind of like a Real Housewives of Genesis report as they're going through the whole thing. They get into Exodus. It's kind of cool. It was like a movie. And then they hit Blueprints. They get to Leviticus. And it's like Stephen King. And they say, that's enough. They give up. 90% of the people who live in New England either don't have a Bible, have never read the Bible, or have a Bible they rarely read. And it makes me wonder, then what is it that they believe about the physical resurrection of Jesus we just talked about? Where are they getting that information from? They're not getting it from the source material. They're getting it secondhand from people who changed the story. But Jesus took them back to the Bible. He said, if you really want to understand what God was doing with Jesus, you got to understand the story in the Bible. That's why we love the Bible. You know, we give out Bibles free. Last night, we gave out 7 Bibles. You stop at the hub and you just say, Pastor Mike told me I could have a Bible. We give them away because we want people to read them. And in the front of our Bible are some really great study aids on how to engage in the Bible. If you want to know about Jesus, then you should go back to the Bible and pick a free one up off the hub. Or we have a group. I love this group. It's called Starting Point. It's what we call a no judgment zone group. It's a group of people who use a curriculum that talks about what it means to be Christian, and you can ask anything and not be judged for it. If you've been saying, well, I've been a Christian a long time, Pastor Mike, and those things aren't for me anymore. Great. Here's the Bible Project. If you go and you Google the Bible Project, this is fabulous website filled with these incredible videos. Every single book of the Bible, many of the people in the Bible, all the big themes of the Bible, arranged in different stories so that you can really get your feet into the Bible. I love the Bible Project, right? It's simple to understand and profound at the same time. Or if you're saying, well, I don't do videos. I'm an adult now. I don't like cartoons. Well, shame on you, right? But there's the Bema Podcast. Bema Podcast, I listen to it while I drive around. I'm telling you, the other day I was driving home listening to the way they were talking about the Noah and the ark and the whole flood thing, and I was like, wow, I had forgotten that. And I had a moment of worship in my truck driving home from a hospital visit, listening to a podcast about Noah and the flood. It's amazing. The Bible is like the oceans of the world. Do you know that it's something like 90% of the ocean in the world has not been explored yet? You can never plumb the full depths of the Bible. That's why you should go back to it. Now, by this time, let's go back to our story. They're nearing Emmaus at the end of their journey, and Jesus acted as they were going along. Now, key decision point. Jesus is like, hey, this has been a great conversation. Looks like it's going on. And they say, stay the night with us since it's getting late. And so Jesus went home with them. And that is in Jesus' culture an invitation to a relationship. Come into my home. I want to know you better. I would love to have a relationship with you. Let's sit at the table and talk some more. And I think this is the most significant thing that happened on the road to Emmaus is that they said, stop and come to my home. They brought their faith into their home. Because you know what happens so often? We're like this guy up here, right in this corner, and your life has not gone the way you've expected. You're really struggling with some questions or some experiences. You're sitting there and you're reflecting about it, and you're like, maybe I should talk to someone about God. And you're kind of broken, and then you go, no, that's stupid. And you walk away. Or maybe you got together with your friend and you're like, you know something? I need to say, the way that you handle life is really different. Things I'm going through, I'm not dealing with them as good as you are. You seem to have this like foundation in your life that I don't understand. And so she sits there and she tells you all about her faith. And you walk away and you're like, huh? And then you never follow up on the conversation. Or you go to church. See, I was going to get church in there somehow. And you're thinking to yourself, man, that guy who spoke was sparkling good. That was amazing. And you walk out and you think, I should do something about what he said. I was thinking, that's really crazy. And you get in the car and the kids fight and it all goes away. Have you ever had that moment? Maybe, I remember when I was standing out at the Grand Canyon looking at the grandeur of the Grand Canyon. Or have you ever been camping at the foot of a mountain that seems to reach up to the heavens? Ever been in a place where there's no light pollution and you look up and you see a galaxy and you think, I'm so small. And in that moment, you have the feeling of a divine other. You go, wow. And then go back to the tent. You could be the person who says, I should talk to someone about God. And then you say, hey, I think there's a pastor at that church. Or when your friend talks about faith, you say, hey, can you tell me some more? Or that moment out in the wild where you felt the presence of the divine other, maybe you should go to church. Or when you're coming out of church, maybe you should follow through with what you say. We say at this church, you're as spiritually mature as you choose to be. I can't make you spiritually mature. I can make sure this church has all the resources and relationships you need to grow mature. It's not my job to make you mature. You got to make that decision for yourself. Like these two people walking along a road who stop and go, wait a minute, come into my life. Come into my home and tell me more. As they sat down to eat, he took the bread and he blessed it. And then he broke it and gave it to him. And suddenly their eyes were open and they recognized him. You know why? The first church that read this story, when they saw he sat down to eat, took bread, blessed it, and broke it, they would have gone, oh, communion. That's exactly what it's meant to tell you. Luke is trying to say to you, do you want your eyes open? Get involved in a community of worship. You want to see Jesus? Get involved in a community that believes in Christ, will teach you from the Bible, and join them in worship. This past Friday and Thursday, we did our big communion service, right? And I got to tell you, it's an amazing thing to see people come and kneel at a cross. And they wrote things on cards, and they wrote things about, like, I want to see more of Christ. I'm going to give my life to Christ. I'm going to be surrendered. What they were basically saying is, hey, Jesus, come home with me. Be a part of my life. You'll learn about Jesus on your own, but you won't really know Jesus outside of a community. You need to be part of a group of people who are going to listen to you and help you understand what God is doing in your life, to pray for you and all that's going on. Whether it's, you know what, you got struggles, right? Finances are going crazy, or marriage isn't doing well, or struggles with the kids, struggles at work, struggles with your health, all these things are going through. And why not be in a group of people going, hey, we can pray for you. You want to walk into a church like this where God is so real, if he feels tangible when you worship. If you really want to know about Jesus, you're going to find a community. A real community where you can join in with other people and they can say, let me help you with that. And they said to each other, right? Jesus disappears, right? He's busy. He's resurrected, saving the world, got a lot to do. It was enough to stretch his legs after he had come back to, he's like, I got to go. Splits, and they go, I love this phrase. I pray to God that people who hear me speak feel like this. Didn't our hearts burn within us as he talked with us on the road and explained the scriptures? You know what they're saying? We were so stupid that we didn't see that it was Jesus, because no one else made us feel this way about the Bible like Jesus did. We should have known better. And then they ran. I love it. They walked 7 miles to get to Emmaus, and they're like, we got to go back. We need to tell people the women are right. And the women go, yeah, we are right. And they're going to go, he's alive. He just went on a walk with us. He showed up in our lives unexpectedly. We welcomed him into our homes. We entered into worship, and we saw Jesus. Isn't that how it works? It's not complicated. You want to discover Jesus? Take a step of faith. You really want to know Jesus? Start to engage the Bible. You really want to experience Jesus? Join in worship. Don't stand there. I was sitting at a back table when Pastor Laurel was preaching, and someone turned around and goes, oh, you're in Sinner's Row. I was like, what? And you know what breaks my heart is when I walk from the back of the worship center to the front, and this is how people worship. That's not worship. That's listening. You live in a country where you can worship without persecution. You don't have to worry about being arrested. You don't have to worry that your pastor is going to be dragged out in front of a church, beaten to death, and then your church lit on fire. You don't have to be in a church where people take Bibles and rip them up book by book so they can pass them around because there's not enough for everybody. You're not in a place, in a country in the world where you fear going to worship because of the guns that soldiers carry. You are a place in the world where you've been given the blessing of worshiping freely without reprisal. And I'm just saying, maybe that's a gift you should open up. I understand the world is crazy. I get it. I read the news. Who knows what's happening with our economy? I do not look at the status of my IRA because my IRA looks like a super coaster, the way that it's dipped and kind of gone all over the place. This is my retirement. This is my future. And I understand that for some of you, you're looking at that, trying to figure out how you're going to put your kids through college. I understand that for some families, kids are scared, right? It's not even safe to go to FSU without being worried about being shot. We live in a world where politicians create tension, not manage it. Where the impact of our country around the world has been a shockwave. And we're worried about our future. I get that. We're worried about our homes. We're worried about the chaos that goes up from outside the world that comes into our world. It's just, if you want to see the state of our world, just open up Facebook and mourn what people write. I get that. But in this place, you have an opportunity to meet the one who has conquered death. We sing this great song, when night is fallen, which is how the world feels, when fear is common, it's all over Facebook and social media. Still, it's like showing up on a road. You're calling me. That's why you're here, because Christ called you here. When faith is lost, when you're at that point, maybe your faith isn't what it used to be, or you've never had it and you're feeling that emptiness. Maybe your hope is exhausted. You know what? It's Jesus who can be your strength. When my mind says I'm not good enough, because no matter what position you hold, there's going to be someone who will yell at you, you're not good enough. God, you're enough for me. And here's the key, the decision you need to make. I've decided I'm not giving up. Why? Because you won't give up on me. Why don't you read that last line again with me? You won't give up on me. Your love is holding on and it won't let go. I feel it breaking out like an echo.